Thanks for giving us the opportunity too, by the way, to come in and chat about what we're kind of doing and what makes us tick at DSH. Let me give a quick intro for Chad and Dylan who are on. Dylan's my CISO. He and I have worked together for a lot of years in a couple different spots. And Dylan is actually a really good ISO. For him, it's a partnership with me, with Chad, with his peers, with our program staff to actually like get something done. So I joke with him that like our default ISO firewall rule went from like default no to default yes, and then a couple rules in to verify what we're doing and make sure we do it securely and whatnot. And then Chad is our chief technology officer. I met him when he was a help desk kid at Coalinga State Hospital years ago. And he was doing all the things that like a DevOps engineer does now, like automating, orchestrating, writing code to do as much as you could. And I was like, God, that's a smart guy. And he came up to Sacramento and kind of worked his way up. And when I became CIO a couple of years ago, Chad applied for and got my job as CTO, which I was really happy about. Quick background on me. I've been at state hospitals for 12 years. So I was at state hospitals when it was Department of Mental Health in 2009, 2010. I started as a programmer. I've been a system admin. I was the project director for our biggest IT project at the time. I was our CTO for about 4 years. And the last couple of years, I've been our CIO. I joke that DSH is the biggest department that literally nobody knows. We have 12,000 staff across 6 locations. We're the 3rd largest department in the state. I had no idea what DSH did or DMH did before I started working here in 2009. We serve about 6,000 patients every day. We have 12,000 patients that cycle through our system yearly. Some stay for just a few months, some stay for years. I have about 200 IT staff that work and provide IT support. So 200 staff versus 12,000 users equals a horrible ratio of IT to staff. And that feeds one of the kind of goals that we're trying to do, which is around automation. I'll talk about that in a little bit. DSH years ago was literally 6 different kind of silos, 6 different ways of doing everything. We have been working for the past maybe 8 years on consolidating, implementing new systems, single sources of truth, single IT systems to provide business value across the way. And that's all with kind of one goal in mind, which for the last several years has been EHR. We want to implement an electronic health record. It's our biggest, most strategic project that we have done or are doing or will do for the foreseeable future. We've been laying groundwork for years on it. Whether that's like consolidating our network, consolidating Active Directory, building out kind of a centralized pharmacy system, a centralized dental system, that kind of thing. When I took over a couple years back, we had, I had like a really flushed out team. Most of I didn't have to fill too many spots. I had a really good roadmap that we developed with my predecessor. I had a bunch of projects in flight, and then boom, 4 months in, COVID hit and literally everything we were doing stopped. So we slowed down. So our EHR just slowed down because I no longer had any clinical staff to help me because they were all doing COVID response. I had projects like building out a document management system got killed and said, you've got to build something else instead. So we built a vaccine management system. We were working on human capital, like an HRMS, that got killed. We built instead a televisitation system. So we kind of IT switched and started providing, what the business needed at the time, right? And it showed me a couple things. One was that the roadmap was unsustainable because you can't have a 7-year roadmap, an 8-year roadmap, because something's going to happen over time that's going to either be like a global pandemic or different technology gets implemented or whatever it is, some kind of weather, climate change problem. So we kind of pivoted our long-term roadmaps to a little bit shorter, like 18-month actionable roadmaps that I'll go through a couple of them today. And the second thing it kind of showed me was that we had to be agile. Like IT likes to think that we're agile. And I think in a lot of cases we have been. What was really impressive to me was that like, it wasn't just IT that became agile. My exec team became agile during COVID. We went from taking months and months and months to make a decision about like a policy or a procedure or something like that to doing it in a couple hours, which was really, really impressive, considering like our history of how long some of these processes took. So with that, let me go through a couple items that are kind of on top of my mind and things that I'm interested in us working on. And then I'll go through a couple pages of roadmaps, and then I'll turn it over to Chad. Top of mind, very first thing, everything we're working towards is EHR. Like I said, by far our #1 project, working at it for years. We have even lined up, like, in order to do this project, we have to do 12 other sub-projects. We're working on the sub-projects now, so that we can actually, when we bring the EMR vendor on in about a year and a half, we're set for success. The next 3 items, I joke they're all #2, right? Like there's one's not more important than the other. They're all pretty important to me. But I'll just go through security first. So since Dylan's here with me, security for us cannot be built downstream. It has to be developed, implemented upstream. We can't bolt it on. We can't. In the past, we have bolted that on. We've sometimes ignored things that we shouldn't have ignored, and we've somewhat paid a price for some of that. And so now we're kind of looking at everything with security in mind. Dylan's team has gotten greatly expanded over the last couple of years. His own budget, his own set of tools, his own operations side that actually works towards securing our environment. And so we put a fair amount of effort into that now. And we've gone from kind of that security is the enemy to security is just built in, right? And that's where we wanted. During COVID, we saw a fair amount of uptick of incidents or possible incidents, right? Phishing attacks. We saw, honestly, attacks from what looked like maybe they could be a nation state. We saw an internal threat actor do something really, really bad and landed us in the newspaper for something that he shouldn't have done. And so with that, when we're looking at this, we need to be building systems and tools and putting those in place that kind of provide us broad capabilities to respond to these things, but to secure it in the first place. So security is super important. Data is another lesson learned I had from COVID as well. When we were first rolling out our vaccination program, we literally had 4 single sources of truth for who was vaccinated, which just became just totally unmanageable, where I would report one thing, our hospital executive directors would report something else, maybe our medical officer would report something else, and we were all within a few people of each other. But it's like, we spent all our time trying to reconcile that. So we've got to be better at data going forward. I want our organization to be data centric. I want us to make decisions based on like actual empirical evidence and not just a gut feeling. And I like the gut feeling, but I want us to actually like have something to back that up. I think we need to be long-term putting resources into things like data science, predictive analytics. I think long-term, my application team, we start buying more software and custom building less. And so when we do, we don't get rid of people. We retool those people and make them data analysts, data, developers. They build out Tableau dashboards. They work in kind of some of our cloud systems and work on things like that. The last piece I'll talk about, and then I'll hit a couple slides, is modernization. So right now, I think I have a decent infrastructure, a decent kind of technology posture, but I think it's decent as of a few years back, and I don't want to run like a 2016 infrastructure. I want us to have modern systems. I want us to employ technologies that help migrate workload out of our hospitals. Like, I don't want to have a huge data center at each hospital. I want to have a very small amount of compute there. And then most things are sitting up in a public cloud or in a centralized data center. And as I said earlier, kind of alluded to it, we have such a bad staffing ratio, staff to IT, that the only way to really like get by and do a good job, deliver value, is I need to start automating and orchestrating as much as possible. So I need to have a tool like ServiceNow that's leveraged into like an HR process that automatically creates a user when they get hired, as opposed to having somebody at my help desk type something in that, an Active Directory account. I need to have tools like UiPath, which we just bought, come in and automate just reading through forms and parting a PDF out into 7 different spots that it goes for our business. Those are the kinds of things that we want to be investing in over the next multiple years. And I would say this, I'd say not every project has to specifically be in alignment with one of those 4 types of initiatives. But kind of we're feeling like as a management area, management team, those are the 4 areas that we want to be focusing on. And to be honest, like those are the 4 areas that I feel like if we've made like market improvements on over the next several years, I'll feel like when I leave the organization, it'll be better than I inherited it. And I think I inherited a great organization. So I think that would be something for us. And with that, let me pull up a couple slides because I know everybody loves slides. So I'm going to pull as 2 different decks here. The first one is going to be the first part of our strategy. And what I did is, let's see, you should be able to see that now. Hey, Chad, can you see it? Can you guys see this?
It is starting screen sharing. I don't see it yet.
You must see it now.
Yes,
Yeah.
we got it.
So,
full view.
what's that?
We see the full view.
Okay, perfect. This is great. Yeah. So one of the things we try to do is I try to take our 30-page long, roadmap that I'd kind of inherited and take it and get rid of all the words. Although this is a pretty wordy slide, but I'll hit the other 2 soon. And get it into actionable stuff that somebody can just remember 1 page, right? And so for here, like our strategy is our technology initiatives are the 4 things that I talked about earlier. We also at the same point are trying to develop our team. We're tracking kind of risks and challenges. And then if I look at my guiding principles, I mean, those are like guardrails, right? So, and I won't go through all these, but like the first one is prioritize solutions to business problems. Don't just buy cool technology. Don't just say, my God, like there's this new cloud offering and I want to move my entire infrastructure there, or there's some new kind of hyper-converged storage and nobody, or infrastructure that nobody's ever going to know. Like I want to push the ball down the field. I want my chief medical officer to say to me, this is really cool what you guys did. And so we want to do kind of things like that. The reason we're doing some of these kind of documents is so that I can be talking with the execs about it, but also they're like consumable enough that like my help desk has that and can actually understand it. And when they're talking to somebody, they can bring up some of this stuff too, right? And where Chad or Dylan are talking with their business partners, they can do the same thing. I'll go through a couple more slides before I turn it over. This one I actually kind of like. We'd never really seen it depicted like this, but I like the target diagram that we broke our environment up into our 4 business goals, right? A safe environment, organizational excellence, innovation, and integration. And then we broke up the projects we're doing in the short term, medium term, longer term up here. And we broke them up by line of business and by goal. And so you can kind of see where we're putting most of our effort in, which makes sense. Clinical operations, there's a fair amount that's going to be there because we're a hospital, right? But that's a good consumable way that we found for people to like start taking in that information. And then I'll hit 2 more slides here. This is just one team's 18-month roadmap. I just chose one that wasn't represented by Dylan or Chad, but it's the goal is that every quarter, each team, so I have like an infrastructure team, a network team, a security team, PMO, my app dev and data team, they update their roadmap so that as we're having these meetings with our business partners, we can be going through and we can show them what are we doing? Well, what do you want us to start? What's on here that, oh, human capital management, no, let's junk that. And I'd rather you work on X instead. So we're kind of trying to track that. And then let me show you my last one here. This, And here is. All right, you see that one pager, Dylan or Chad?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So this is at a high level what the entire department or division's doing, right? So it shows rolled up into like hospital services, but basically hospital operations, applications and data security, InfoSec, and then kind of my infrastructure people and what we're doing kind of this quarter through early 2022. We actually have metrics that we're going to keep track of this with. We're going to that's going to end up becoming like a Tableau dashboard, and we can basically start keeping score. We've got some metrics around some things that Dylan does, some things that our clinicians track, and we're going to kind of start capturing that and then gauging our value to the business by doing that. With that, I am going to pass it to Chad. There, you got it.
I do. Thanks, Andrew. And thank you very much for the invite here. It's great to be here and to talk with you all today. So just a little more brief background about myself. As Drew mentioned, I grew up in sort of small town Central Valley. I've been actually with the Department of State Hospitals since 2005. And I've really kind of jumped over as a technologist, a little bit of everything, right? So from help desk to, server engineering, network engineering, all of that stuff. Although, my heart still is a software engineer by trade. So that is my primary bread and butter and sort of where I grew up in the industry, if you will. In my current role, I've been it's been probably over a year, although I'd say, with the pandemic, the amount of time has been blurred. What I wanted to talk about today really was some challenges that came up during the pandemic and how we dealt with those, and then maybe some challenges that we're still dealing with and sort of how I've approached those. As Drew mentioned, really business value is the largest driver here. And so, with our ratio the way it is, how do we do more with less is a really important question. And I think how we do that really is automation. If we're not going to be able to easily get more staff, we have to be able to invest in automation and tools to make some of the plumbing and the M&O operations a little bit easier to free up time so that really we can have those staff work on new cutting edge technology that's really going to move the needle forward. So net new capabilities, balancing those with M&O has certainly been a challenge. I think as the pandemic came, one of the things that hit us first really was our remote work capabilities. And Dylan will probably talk about that as well. Obviously, there's security implications there, but we went from primarily workstation driven, we have machines, people have an assigned desk to all of a sudden having, most of our admin staff, whether at the hospitals or in Sacramento headquarters, working remotely. So the challenge there is, your VPN becomes, mission critical infrastructure at that point where everybody's working remotely. And so that was certainly a technical challenge. And I'd say that, we've pretty much gotten past that. We are deploying a proxy-based VPN, although, that didn't help us during the pandemic, but I think investing in remote work capabilities was huge from that perspective. And really, one of the challenges we had early was deploying laptops quickly enough, right? So normally laptops are deployed for maybe a couple of those remote workers that, are not in the office, but all of a sudden, all staff need laptops. So how do you sort of respond to that? So I think really what the pandemic has done from a technology perspective has sort of forced us to innovate in ways that, maybe we hadn't thought of before. So for example, with laptops, we were doing things like mailing those over to try to keep staff so they don't have to come into the building to check one out, right? And we can do things like e-signature through tools like SimplyGov, which we've implemented. And I think those types of things just open up when we realize, oh, actually we can do it this way. We don't necessarily need to have staff come in to check out an iPhone, right? So we actually implemented a program to be able to mail those, setup is easy. They log in, policies push to the device, and we can manage those completely remotely. So I think that was a big part of it. And we deployed probably, I don't know the number offhand, but hundreds of laptops, and we did it very, very quickly. And so really it was every staff who wanted a laptop could get one. We had an assembly line essentially imaging those machines so that when they arrive, the user logs in. It's a pretty seamless experience. And I think, as we move forward, remote work capabilities are going to continue to be a thing. I think overall, from a technology standpoint, what we really want to do is become an organization that can serve customers, clients from any point across the state. So whether that's somebody who works at a hospital location or somebody who works further away from headquarters, we need to be able to have those remote work capabilities. And so we've invested a lot of time and energy into that with the ZPA deployment, which is coming up very soon. From a user perspective, I think the good thing is it's more transparent to them in terms of how they connect to that. We can stand up MFA in front of it, ensure that that's secure, and it's just an easier, seamless experience for the user. And that also gives us some capabilities on the back end to really secure specific workloads, so that you're not really just VPing into the network and having access to everything. We can actually control from the proxy perspective and policy-based, what roles have access to what systems. And so that gives us a lot more flexibility there as well. One of the things, Drew mentioned data, and I think from a technology perspective, that's been one of the largest challenges on my staff, especially the data engineers, really is keeping up with that. The business, right when this pandemic hit, was under an incredible amount of pressure to track, vaccine data, testing data. All of those things needed to be done very quickly. They needed it tomorrow. They couldn't wait 2 weeks for an application to be able to track that, right? And so normally when we're talking about app development, there's anybody who's done that, there's a ton of plumbing code that's required. You have to stand up Windows servers. You have to stand up your SQL servers. You have to write your authentication authorization code. You got to test it. All of that stuff takes a really, really long time. And I think what we realized through this is, let's try to find the easiest path forward so that we can get an MVP out the door and get the customers using something, rather than waiting, months to do a full development cycle. And by that point, in pandemic time, that's too late. I mean, if you're 2 weeks too late at that point, they're already using spreadsheets or shadow IT access databases, right? We saw things like that. So I think really the key there that Drew mentioned was getting agile, but also from a technology perspective, being open to tools that maybe we hadn't used in the past. So one of the things we're doing that I think has been a pretty big success is using rapid application development platforms. So we actually bought OutSystems. We're looking at Power Apps, but we have a large deployment of OutSystems right now. It actually replaced a large InfoPath deployment. And so that does two things for us. One, it lets us roll out applications faster, because developers are not spending time writing CSS, writing HTML, trying to get that button the exact right color or lining things up. So I think from our perspective, it was a shift of, let's focus on just the critical capabilities that the business is asking for in this particular situation, and then not let perfection get in the way of good enough. So one of the things we did there was, it's okay if it doesn't look pretty. If the business outcome that the business needs here is getting met with this, then it's a win, right? And we can always go back and make it look pretty. But I think what we've really done is focused on really driving that business value and not getting caught up in, like Drew said, cool technology just for doing the cool technology. All of it really needs to be tied to business objectives. So what we've done, I think with the pandemic sort of forcing this, but also from Drew's leadership is really focusing on what the exec team is pushing forward and their strategic goals, and aligning our technology strategy to make sure that we're moving the needle forward on anything we invest in, and the time that we're spending on this. COTS is something we also focus on. Drew mentioned doing less custom development. I think, with custom development, you end up getting products that may be tailor fit, but at the same time, you've spent a lot of cycles at that point getting something that, you're reinventing the wheel in some cases, where if there's already something that can be purchased, you get the business value a lot faster. It's a lot easier to bring in a vendor and implement something that's, been proven that it is, to build something completely from scratch, go through that entire development cycle, and then maybe not even, hit the mark at the end of what you're trying to do. So if we focus everything we're doing on delivering business value, and the technology piece comes second, I think we're able to hit that mark much more consistently throughout, especially with the pandemic. I mentioned really things like OutSystems and Power Apps, just to dig into that slightly more without getting too technical. What we're talking about is the ability to deliver a line of business application in days, not weeks or months, which is the normal cycle that it takes. And I think the reason for that is you're not building database schemas from scratch. You're not going in and spending a ton of time on CSS and outline and layout. All of those things end up taking up a lot of time. And I think if you can cut that cycle down, what that does is it allows the developers to focus on what's important in the application. What is, that MVP? So, I don't have the image here, but sort of building the skateboard to the car analogy, right? That you see in Agile and Scrum. We see that a lot. One of the good things about really the timing of when we started to need to deliver these applications very rapidly was we spent several years over the last, several years focusing on implementing Agile and Scrum. So traditionally our development shop had been waterfall, right? So usually it's, gather requirements, go away for a while, build an application, and then you tell the user, here it is. Do you like it? You may hit the mark, you may not, but that a lot of time is spent, on building out a large application module by module. We are a completely Scrum shop now in the app dev unit. And what we've done as well is move that sort of same development philosophy over to data systems. So with the pandemic, it's great that you've given us a capability and now we can enter the data, but how do we track that? What capabilities are we giving the business to pull the data out? It's really easy to put data in, but a lot of times we don't think about the analytics side until the application's released. Data often comes at the last when it should be at the first, just like security, right? You want that at the beginning. It's the same thing with data analytics. And so really shifting that focus to think, what kind of data analytics am I going to need? And then let's build the application from that perspective instead of figuring out, okay, now I've got my database schema that worked. Now, how do I pull the data out of it? So really, when we talk about tooling and things that have helped us here, we're not getting more staff. And anybody who's done data analytics and data science knows it's very difficult and requires an extremely specific skill set of people to be able to drive the needle forward on anything, when it comes to advanced analytics, machine learning, AI capabilities. All of that is something that's thrown around a lot in the industry, but actually implementing it is another challenge. So I think one of the things that I'm focused on with all of this is how to get value out of data quickly. And so there are a lot of cloud tools out there. Instead of reinventing the wheel and building, a data warehouse from scratch and having your developers focus on ETL jobs, what we've done is looked at, tools like Snowflake. We're looking at tools like Azure Data Factory, things that can help with that ETL process and cut it down. Really are going to drive the needle forward on us, allowing the business to own their data. Traditionally, IT had been the sort of the gatekeepers of that data. And I think what we're realizing now is we're not the experts. There's too much data for us to really understand the intricacies and the questions that the business needs to ask out of that data. And so what we need to do is focus on sort of building the tools and capabilities so that the business has those, they can go into Tableau, connect to the data sources that they own, right? Doing it securely through role-based access allows them to build those those dashboards and get the answers to those questions quickly. And at that point, IT becomes trustworthy to them, right? You want to have a seat at the table when they are building a new capability or the business gets together and says, during the pandemic, we have this challenge. We need to start tracking this data. I want the first call to be IT so that we sit there and we can drive those capabilities forward. They know based on past experience that we're going to do everything we can to enable that capability and not be sort of blockers or, taking 2 months to roll something out. So it's all cutting down on that cycle through forced innovation to get an MVP out. And really it's been just data over the last, 2 years at least. And so I don't expect that to change. As Drew mentioned, data was already important before this pandemic started. And I don't see that changing anytime soon. It's going to become even more critical. And so really what we're trying to do is take skill sets that traditionally maybe had done those thick .NET web apps and transitioning those folks over to understanding the data pipelines and building sort of an analytics, model of excellence, if you can, internally, so that we have those capabilities to roll those initiatives forward. Data analytics is difficult. It's hard to find people who really understand data. And so I think focusing on the training and the people aspect of that has been something that we've been spending a lot of time on. And it's been challenging, you know, when you have certain folks in the organization who really thrive on this and they want to get in and learn new technology, and then you have other folks who may be completely, you know, fine with, you know, doing mainframe development, which, and that's totally, you know, fine. And I think you have to try to focus on, from a management perspective, putting people where they're going to be most effective. And when it comes to the people aspect, I think one of the things with all of this that we had to focus on as well is, don't forget, you know, that everybody's struggling during this time. We're all in this together. And so from a management perspective, you know, things like looking for burnout, and really, you know, as we ramp up that cycle of innovation, that puts additional stress on the staff as well. And you're asking them to do things that are completely outside of their comfort zone. And so I think never forgetting that, you know, it's people at the end of the day who drive these capabilities forward. And we have some, you know, fantastic people working for the state, and for our technologies perspective, you know, we have some very smart individuals. And I think it's from a management perspective been a challenge to try to find out, you know, what their motivations are and what their drivers are. And I think you're much better off, you know, putting someone somewhere where they're actually passionate about the technology than trying to force everybody into, you know, this model or this model, or I want you to work on cloud when they may be interested in data, or mainframe and vice versa. Like, there's always a place for this. And I think it's trying to figure out what those skill sets are and what intrinsically drives your folks, that really help you do more with less outside of the, you know, the technology and automation opportunities that we have. And then just, you know, one thing, and I'll sort of hand it over to Dylan. I think as we look forward to the next couple of years, this technology changes so quickly. It's difficult for, you know, the state in general to keep up with technology trends as they change, whether that's in the development landscape, you know, you're doing networking, you're doing security. It changes so rapidly that you have to keep on top of it from a skills and a training perspective. It is very easy to sort of fall into comfortable technology. And the problem there is, in a year, that's already legacy. And so now you're sort of adding on that technical debt. So one of the things we really focus on over the pandemic and really looking out the next couple of years is going to be sort of, you know, keeping the skills of staff sharp and really making sure that they know we have these training opportunities available, whether that's, you know, doing Pluralsight training, you know, whether that's remote training, you know, that we've budgeted for. I think one of the most important things we can do is focus on that skill set development, because you're gonna, you know, the investment that you make in those staff to learn, you know, MongoDB or, you know, TypeScript or something, you know, whatever they're passionate about will end up helping you in the long run. And you may even find, and we, you know, we've done this with the partnership through Dylan and I, where you find folks that are passionate about information security that might work in the app dev unit, right? And I think it's understanding where their motivations lie, what they're passionate about, and giving them the opportunity to learn on the job as much as they can, try those things out, and sort of help, you know, guide the next generation of developers or server engineers, you know, depending on what they're looking for. So those are just some top of mind things for me. And with that, Dylan, I'll pass it over to you.
All right, thanks, John. Thanks, Drew. So yeah, just to clarify something that Drew said earlier, the default yes rule on the firewall comes after the deny any. So apologize for that. I did notice that there was a significant spike in the number of hits on our IDS from the outside as soon as that was said. So I don't know who's watching and who's got their vulnerability scanner running, but so much like other state employees, I did start as a student assistant back straight out of high school. Well, maybe not all start as a student assistant straight out of high school, but I did. And then within about 5 years, I went through the bachelor's and the master's program at Sac State. I was lucky enough to land at CHP, and that's where I met Drew. And it's also where I met another one of a good friend of mine who was actually a mentor. And after being at CHP for 17 years, he approached me and said, "Hey, I need to bring somebody technical over to state hospitals. Would you be willing to come over?" And again, much like Drew, I didn't really do my research on what the department was. I just trusted this guy because he was a friend, and I didn't realize that I was going from the 4th largest department in the state to the 3rd largest department in the state. I thought I was going to make my job a little easier, and that was not the case. I went from, protecting PII to now protecting PII and PHI. And, the health information and protecting it just brings a whole new set of rules in place. But I've been here since 2012 and acting as ISO in 2015 and then official shortly after that. So as is the case with many chief information security officers, assessing gaps and addressing each of the elements of the NIST cybersecurity framework, identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover, really does help to drive the evolution of our cybersecurity program here at DSH. Incident response has always been a key initiative. Expanding monitoring and response from normal business hours to 24/7 by 365 monitoring has definitely been an evolving effort. Tools and technology are only part of the puzzle. Having a skilled team, which I'm very fortunate to have, and a good relationship with external partners is critical to deal with whatever is thrown our way. Recently, we have engaged with an external private partner for continuous monitoring and response to augment our staff's capabilities as well. I do want to give a big shout out to Vitaly Panich, the California State Chief Information Security Officer, and John Cleveland, his deputy CISO, who was previously the manager of the state SOC, and their team at the Office of Information Security for providing fantastic support and coordination efforts during a cyber attack that we experienced last fall. And that's one that Drew had mentioned that looked like a nation state, and it definitely was quite frightening for a period of time for us. Additionally, a huge thank you during that time to the California Cybersecurity Innovation Center, CalSIC, for providing expert staff to aid the DSH team in the speedy analysis and response during that same attack. So as a healthcare and a government organization, we are not unique in that we are constantly under attack. We've had a number of incidents resulting from external attacks that thankfully have been minor due to the preparation and practice response of our team. But we've also experienced some insider activity that raised concern and has really required us to rethink some of our security strategies and practices. We've significantly enhanced both our privileged access management capabilities, session monitoring, and then also standard user entitlement review process through engagement with the data owners themselves. That's been really key to us. Education of our staff has been a key factor through a variety of education pathways, such as utilizing email to communicate tips and tricks, posters in common work areas, simulated phishing campaigns, small and large group discussions. We've been putting the tools to detect threats into the hands of our users to augment the technical tools and controls that we have in place. I really feel strongly that a well-educated workforce is really what is going to cause us to succeed. Without that, we will definitely fail. Improvements in automation is a pervasive part of our IT culture. Security is no exception, and possibly the most important area, as delays in response during a crisis event is more than just an inconvenience. It can result in catastrophic loss of data or availability of our systems. Internal and external communication is key in the information security unit. Communication with executive leadership, including our director, Stephanie Clendenin, and our Health and Human Services agency partners has been critical in obtaining buy-in from the top for improvements to the security posture of our department. During COVID, it has been challenging to balance spending between medical and safety supplies, software to manage and track new data, and still secure the workflows from an IT perspective. The overwhelming support that I've received from every level has allowed my team to grow in size and thus capability to handle a broader range of solutions. Just to put into perspective, when I first started at state hospitals, there were 3 of us plus a student, and that was only because, again, the mentor that brought me in, Phil DeLeon, he had lobbied for an information security unit that really was a unit of people instead of just having an information security officer that was, a single person. And by having those additional staff, we did start having the ability to start developing more capabilities. And that's only grown over time until the point where we have 10 staff now within my unit, which is fairly unheard of in the information security unit in a state entity. COVID definitely has caused some changes. Many vendors that we presently deal with evolved from medical service providers, not software service providers. So security is not always very robust. Patient and staff testing, vaccination tracking, as Chad mentioned earlier, modified lab services, those all had to be stood up very quickly. And thus we've had to wrap a variety of mitigation measures around them to ensure adequate security. Likewise, secure remote access has become significantly more critical capability. A variety of remote access tools had to be expanded quickly to ensure adequate access for a significant portion of our labor force. Due to delays in deliveries and unavailability of hardware to support remote access, such as laptops, video cameras, headsets, Bluetooth speakers, we had to permit personal devices. And that did require modification to our VPN capacity for departmental devices and our remote application access for personal devices as well. That was coupled with the need to deploy multi-factor authentication capability to thousands of employees that had never worked remotely previously. As an information security officer, the protection of our data had to come first, but a balance had to be reached to allow access in ways we had not considered before. Purely digital pathways had to be stood up and stood up quickly to enable staff who were used to printing and signing key medical and administrative documents to operate in a purely paperless environment. And then one other topic that I'd like to address is the need for mental and emotional health for my staff. And Chad, you talked about this a little bit too, talking about burnout. The security team has had to address a variety of unique issues over the last year and a half. To be as highly performing as possible and fill in the gap as hallway and cubicle conversations basically vanished, we started daily morning stand-up meetings, and those have really stuck. Since March of 2020, we have never had a day without that morning touch point. Sometimes the conversation is centered around the resolution of an issue. Sometimes it's projects we're working on. Sometimes it's just talking about what we did over the weekend or funny pet stories. I hear all kinds of stuff about somebody's new puppy. So we try to keep the cameras on all the time to enable that face-to-face personal contact. And we try to stay in tune with each other's moods to be sure that if someone is feeling the extra stress of working remotely and working in that remote environment, we can address it. All of our technology services division managers went through basically burnout training that was put together by Gartner to help us spot, assess, neutralize the source of, and educate our staff on how to avoid burnout. Maintaining the work-life balance has been important to keep my team healthy. I personally have taken up road cycling with a lot of virtual riding when it's raining, hot, or smoky as it's been lately. But I've worked up to doing century rides now, such as one I'm doing in the Bay Area for multiple sclerosis this September on the 18th and 19th. We do have a variety of cloud services tools that were in place prior to COVID, but which did enable the transition to be more painless. For example, we have Splunk Cloud, currently monitoring by New Harbor Security. We had CrowdStrike, which is just fantastic, which provides endpoint protection for us, firewall, response automation. We have Proofpoint for email protection, automated threat response, archiving, encryption, phishing. Zscaler has been just fantastic. It provides next generation remote access as well as web presence protection and inspection for our managed devices. And likewise, Zscaler ZDX has enabled us to troubleshoot issues with our mobile workforce, such as pinpointing dropped connections and identifying what hardware is causing service degradation. As far as education goes, we have KnowBe4 as our learning management system for phishing and end user IT. And then we have Blackboard LMS for other role-based end user training as well. Forescout for our network access control is controlling 35,000 endpoints. And that's managed in IoT endpoints, including medical devices, printers, wireless personal safety tags, and the massive infrastructure that's needed to support triangulation of every staff member across all 5 of our sprawling hospital campuses. That's just a fantastic system. The PDAS system is the one I'm referring to, if you've ever heard of that one. We have Tenable for scanning internal and external resources. And then Palo Alto gives us on-prem firewall as well as IPS cloud protection and threat hunting capabilities as well. Of course, we are an O365 customer using a variety of their security and workforce automation tools as well. Overall, our security program has been dependent upon balancing the focus placed on each of people, process, and technology, and really working with such a fantastic and supportive team, including Andrew Hinkle here at CIO, and then Chad Corrin, our CTO here on this call, as well as the rest of the TSD senior managers, has really enabled DSH to evolve in this changing landscape. And I really do count myself fortunate to be a part of this team. That's what I have. Back to you, Bill, for questions, or if anybody else wants to chime in.
All right. Terrific. Thank you so much. So valuable, all this great information. Really appreciate it. So folks in the audience, if you want to type your questions into chat, you can also raise your hand and I will attempt to allow you to talk if I push the right button. So please type your questions in or raise your hand. In the meantime, I've got a few questions. So Chad, this one's for you. You talked a lot about data analytics. I was wondering if you could give some examples of applications or specifics, like for example, something you've used maybe to predict behavior to make it safer for staff or something like that. Nothing sensitive. I understand you have a lot of sensitive health data. Wouldn't want you to talk about anything inappropriate, but any applications you can share.
Sure. I mean, so in terms of violence data and what we track there, I can talk a little bit. We have it's a legacy .NET enterprise application that I believe will be replaced by electronic health record, and really that's our sort of incident management tool. And as Dylan mentioned, our PDAS system, which keeps staff safe as they walk around the facility. They can pull their alarm, and someone can come help them if there's an incident that happens, they're attacked, anything like that. And so that data really is entered in through hospital staff who are working the floor. It could be anybody who sort of works there, and that is considered an incident, right? And so that data all gets put into a SQL backend and sort of collected. And so periodically we run reports off of that. I would say from a prediction standpoint, one of the things that I think is a huge opportunity for DSH as a whole when it comes to data analytics is doing more of that predictive analytics, like you mentioned. I would say we're pretty far behind when it comes to where we should be analytically, right? And most of what we're doing is still your legacy SSRS reports, your one-time data pulls. We have a small data warehouse that captures some of that data, but the traction really has not been there to build that capability out. And so when I mentioned sort of looking at tools like Snowflake or cloud-based data warehousing platforms, I think there is a literal gold mine of information that we're collecting, but just not really making business decisions off of, only because the capabilities are not there from a technical perspective. But if we knew where incidents are taking place, and what factors might be driving to those incidents, whether that's a change in a patient's medication, a call to a family member that upset someone, time of day, hot, during the summer, maybe incidents go up. There's a lot of things I think that we could predict if we had those capabilities. And so I think, to just kind of answer the question, I don't believe we're doing that as much as we should be. And that's a capability gap. I think that is a large opportunity to affect a lot of people. Staff safety is a huge issue, very important for the executive team. And so I think, from that perspective, if TSD could deliver value, that would be a huge area where I think as we build that analytics capability out, there's a ton of great stuff we could do, with that, like I said, like a treasure trove of data that's just kind of sitting there and being analyzed, but from a very basic level of, like I mentioned, your standard reports, Excel outputs, those kind of things.
Terrific, thank you. Okay, so going to the chat here, how are you covering .ot and SCADA devices?
Hey, Dylan, that feels like that's a you question.
Yeah, I kind of thought you were going to send that my way. So,
Yeah.
what I'll say there is DSH is very much a small city. So we do have a little bit of what I would consider to be SCADA, and that's that SCADA, and that's that we do have some power generation that does occur within state hospitals. But for the most part, that we're not doing necessarily manufacturing anything. Although we do have plant operations that is very significant. We have been working on doing a lot of automation, and we have a variety of things to kind of macro segment off some of those tools. As I'm sure whoever asked that question is probably aware, you have to rely on a lot of systems that may not be very secure. Or that we may not trust, and that we don't want them on the same network as our patient network. And so we've done a variety of measures to kind of mitigate that, keep them off the network, or if they do write on the network, then they're writing it on the network in a protected manner, so that traffic is isolated. We do have some power generation from solar that's going in a couple of our locations as well. So that's been an interesting endeavor. But yeah, for the most part, we have a number of different tools that we're utilizing to kind of watch behavior. And also to segment off that traffic as need be.
Terrific. Okay, next question. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I think we can make it through these. So next question is from Abdul. For the EHR effort, has there been a partnership with CDCR or Correctional Health to leverage what they have done or are doing?
Yeah, I'll take this one. The answer is yes. We've worked pretty closely with CCHCS to not only see what they're doing, requirements, what worked, what didn't, but get their lessons learned. So when I was talking earlier, I was talking about doing a bunch of sub projects that we knew we had to do before the EHR started. A lot of those started because CCHCS had said, we should have done this first. We should have done that first. And so we kind of took that and ran. So we've been partnering with them. I will say we've talked to them about using their Cerner system, and it's possible it could work out, and it's possible it won't work out. For step one for it to actually, have that true partnership would be that when we do the down select and actually go and figure out what EMR vendor we want, it would have to be Cerner, right? And there's a number of players in the space. And so for our procurement, we're going to do an agile challenge-based procurement. We're going to have, in my head, 15 vendors apply, and it gets down selected to like 3 or 4. We do some POCs and kind of go through that process. Like I said, at the end of the day, if Cerner's up there, we probably have some more discussions with prison healthcare, but then it also kind of means that they have to want to share with us too, or somebody at that level has to say, yeah, we think this is a good idea. But in general, we like to use, reuse as much as possible. And if that made us for a more successful, quicker, more robust implementation, we would be all for that.
Thank you. Okay, next question from Tony. Continuous learning culture, given the rigidity of state job descriptions, what are some methods you have adopted to help staff learn new skills, try out, or move into new roles?
We do. I'll talk about it a little bit. Dylan, sounds like you want to jump into. We've done some different things historically. We've done things like a day of autonomy where we let people kind of figure out a problem they have, and then they go and build a solution. And we've actually had some pretty good output from that. We've had like systems that somebody built as a proof of concept in their day, and then all of a sudden we use that all the time. Especially some stuff around like data mining for our PDAS application and whatnot. Dylan, what did you have besides that?
I was just going to say, information security in the cybersecurity realm, that's one that traditionally people aren't expert in until they're expert in it. And so it's very difficult to hire staff, especially at like the associate and even at the staff level or the IT specialist level for to refer to the current state classifications. And it would seem that there is rigidity in the state job descriptions, but the one thing that I will say is that generally the descriptions are broad enough that you pretty much just have to have some kind of experience, some kind of degree to really be able to apply. So to be eligible, it's not really that difficult to be eligible. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be marketable. But what I will say is that, at least from my standpoint, there's no way I'm going to find people that already know how to use all the tools that we utilize here. And so generally speaking, what we're looking for is somebody that's really that has the ability to analyze data, that has that right thought process, that has that right mentality. They might not be strong in security, but they might have the ability to look at a problem and attack it and be able to work through it and be diligent in that work. One of the employees that I have, we brought in that was basically working on physics stuff. It was optics and really had no relation to security at all. And yet she's been just stellar in our unit and has been one of the key members of our unit. So just know that as an employer, we're not going to be so rigid that we're going to look at what your past experience is. We are going to look at your ability to grow into the role as well. And so, training is always available. People probably have less of a tendency to take advantage of the training that has been available than that's actually there. So, I do try to encourage, at least on my staff, I try to encourage people to just look out for things. So many things are remotely accessible now that were not remotely accessible before. Maybe you had to go to an in-person class, and now, in order to stay viable, those companies have had to offer more remote training options. And so, we do, like, we subscribe to certain services that people can just log into and take classes as they want. And then likewise, I encourage my staff to get those new skills and those new roles. And I don't try to hold on to somebody and say, no, I'm not gonna let you advance because I want you to stay in my unit. I want them to grow because they're going to be more useful to us as a state as well. It's not just DSH, and it's just not just my unit. It's really how do we operate as a state as a whole.
Terrific. Okay, next question. What is the department doing to clean and transform the structured data and unstructured data used for your data analytics, RPA, or data warehouse?
Sure, I can take this one. So a couple of things when it comes to this. We have a mixture of both structured and unstructured, as many do. I mentioned that sort of InfoPath project, right, where we had to replace that. Well, one of the strategies we took there was using something like MongoDB to sort of store that unstructured data. And so that's probably the largest repository of unstructured data we have now sitting in MongoDB on-prem. And then, obviously the SQL data. So there's a mix of things going on. We have some legacy ETL jobs that are just running your standard SSIS packages, in SQL Server on a scheduled job. That is how sort of what I call our legacy data warehouse is running. And then we're doing some things, to move that forward to not get sort of stuck in having to build those large SSIS packages. We are looking at some cloud tuning. Azure Data Factory is one of those, as I sort of mentioned that earlier. So that'll help with ingestion. Although, it does get a little bit complicated with sort of building your custom ETL logic inside of that. The other answer is we're doing some MuleSoft. Now, traditionally, that's API based, right? So it's transaction to transaction, but we have been able to stick some ETL work in there. And then early on, we looked at Informatica and started to build some ETL in there. And I think we may continue that at some point for data warehousing. But really, it's gonna be determined, I think, eventually where we land with ETL specifically and not application integration with what data analytics platform we end up with, whether that's Snowflake and how that ingestion works, or whether it's an Azure data warehouse and how that ingestion works and what tooling's available there. So I think it's sort of a mix of legacy and newer stuff. And then, it's up in the air on where we go from there.
Okay, lightning round here, just a couple of minutes to go. What role does the department have in the overall data initiative that's going on at Health and Human Services Agency and the new Center for Data Insights and Innovation?
We have multiple folks both on the technology side and on the business side that participate in that. So including our current chief deputy, but our data management office manager, some technical staff, our application group manager as well. And then on the business side, a fair amount of folks as well.
All right. Next question, can you please share details on upcoming procurements? We won't let that be the last question though.
Yeah, I mean, I will say I have no idea what's next in the hopper. In May and June of the last fiscal year, we met as a management team, figured out what we were going to buy, figured out what our initiatives are. I've got this amount of budget and this amount is discretionary, and we figured out what was in there, but I don't know what's on the what's coming up tomorrow or anything like that.
Okay, thank you. So final question, this one's from Tony. Is your goal to migrate from data center to a single cloud or to operate across multiple cloud environments?
It'll be multiple cloud.
My guess is multiple. Yeah, I mean, the right workload and the right cloud.
All right, excellent. I think that takes us up to time. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Andrew, Dylan, Chad, wonderful presentation today. So much valuable information for the industry to understand what your priorities and initiatives are, and really appreciate your time today. We're going to have this posted on our website, so in the next couple of days. And again, thank you, and thanks to our audience for tuning in. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.